Well, today I'm speaking again with Jamie Roberts. Jamie, you're an academic in Australia, and we spoke at length about, I guess it was a little over a month or so ago. There's
Mm,
another video. I'll link to that video below. So anybody who hasn't listened to that conversation, I recommend going back and listening to it because you really go into a lot of your background and the how you found yourself on your current trajectory. And
mm,
I'm glad to have the chance to speak with you again, both to kind of follow up on some of the points that we spoke about last time, and because when we talked last time, you closed by doing a reading of a Shakespeare sonnet and giving a literary analysis that kind of tied together some of the themes that he was bringing up in that work with some of our modern and contemporary cultural
mm.
dilemmas,
Yeah, that's it.
conundrums. Yeah, it was
Mm,
uh, it was really it was fascinating, and you offered to do that again with another work or two, and so I'm very much looking forward to that. Thank you for
mm.
being here.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's amazing how much, I do politics, I do international relations, but really, my heart's with, literature and culture. And I love the classics because I'm sure I said this last time. When you see the same ideas coming up again and again down through the centuries, it seems like it gives us a deep insight into, human nature, the human condition, those parts of us that never change. And so there's that kind of triangulation, you look at what's happening now, you look at issues people's faced long ago, and when you see considerable overlap, you know, it gives you just a deep understanding of contemporary problems, um, as well as a certain, I don't know, it gets a bit fatalistic as well because you think, well, my God, here we are yet again. Maybe we're not exactly going to solve it,
Yeah,
you
doomed
know,
to repeat our patterns.
doomed to repeat. But then at the same time, maybe the point is, still by recognizing the patterns, we push back the worst of it, and maybe that's the best you can hope for in a way, which is something.
Mhm. Well, one of the things that I was really struck by in that conversation was when you spoke about being originally drawn to psychology and then
Mm,
sort of finding your way into the study of literature because it
mm,
actually offered more depth and nuance of understanding of kind of the human condition and the patterns we find ourselves in. And I, in thinking about that after the discussion, I thought that one of my, I guess, concerns or qualms with contemporary psychology is that it does sort of tend to try to uh, try to affix labels and categories to things rather than seeing all of the gray areas that we
mm.
have. It's sort of that same middle path that we spoke about that you're finding through literature because you're really seeing so much more complexity and
Mm.
subtlety in how we repeat our patterns and how human lives play out.
Yeah, I like that point. The middle path point's great. There's this, yeah, part of us is always seeking patterns and labels, and then the other part is always seeking to be faithful to complexity and endless depth. And the right way is, yeah, somewhere through the middle. And yeah, you're quite right. I think quite possibly literature does take us through that middle path. You have a mixture of, yeah, patterns, but then also, yeah, the endless complexities of individual difference. So yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. I think that's definitely what's going on. So yeah, you certainly see that in a book like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Have a mixture of, yeah, patterns, but then just endless complexity and ambivalence, which has a beauty of its own. So yeah, for sure.
I love that book. I read it to my daughters when they were small, and I read it to my sons when they were my
Mm.
kids are I've got two daughters that are 13 and 15 years older than my two sons. And so I've had
Oh,
two separate
wow.
sets of children that I've been able to explore literature with.
Mm.
And that is a favorite of mine. And so I'm looking forward to hearing your analysis.
Yeah, it's an amazingly deep book that I used to teach a course on it that went for a whole semester, and so I was able to draw out enough depth from it to fill 12 or 13 1-hour lectures. So it's quite a remarkable book.
Well, here's a tremendous challenge then. How do you distill that down into a 45-minute to an hour conversation?
Well, how you do it is I'm gonna just focus on a few of the poems. So
Okay.
yeah, there's like vast amounts of things I'm gonna completely ignore or touch on in passing. But yeah, one of the things that I mean, when we read the book, we're aware of the poems, but I don't think most people are aware of what the what some of the poems are referring to, and they're like satires or parodies, of existing poetry. And that's and when you understand the existing poetry it's making fun of, the book becomes even richer and deeper. And that's what I wanted to talk about today.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. The first one that comes to my mind is "How doth the little crocodile?"
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't know. You take it away and share what you'd like to share.
All right. I'll share the screen.
Okay.
Here we go. I put together a slideshow.
Excellent. Awesome.
Um, I'm a compulsive slideshow maker. How's this going here? Full
Great.
screen. How's that looking?
It looks great.
Yeah, I haven't said this yet, but yeah, another reason why I'm a big Lewis Carroll fan is, I mean, I was sort of alluding to that already, but Lewis Carroll's a troll.
Huh.
Yeah, maybe it comes through in the books a bit. Maybe we just sense it, but he's actually a troll. He's like from way back in the day, and with trolls, there's good trolls and bad trolls. I mean, obviously, there's people who are contrarians just for the sake of being contrarians, and they can be pretty painful. But you know, even when I thought about Donald Trump, and I was initially horrified by Trump, like many people, but as time rolled on, part of me thought, perhaps to a degree he's performing a useful trolling function,
Mhm.
dare I say. And I'm still not a huge fan for various reasons, but you can see complexity. Anyway, that's my.
Mhm.
I'm not saying Lewis Carroll's a Donald Trump, but it just comes to my mind that Lewis Carroll, I think, is performing a very, very useful trolling function. And so, like I have here on my slide, battling the woke of his day. So
Mhm.
in a sense, this whole sort of woke political correctness thing, it does never end. We talked about this last time as well. It shifts form down through the ages, but it's just an aspect of the human condition, really. So yeah, that's why I say, I thought of an Elon Musk quote as well. What the heck? I like to have contemporary tie-ins. I already said this already, things never change, but remember in the recent Elon Musk interview, he says, I was trying to play the clip, but I couldn't embed the damn thing. But anyway, he says, what I care about is the reality of goodness, not the perception of it. And what I see all over the place is people who care about looking good while doing evil. Fuck them. And yeah, that's the objection. That's one of the fundamental objections to wokeness or political correctness. Obviously, it's why people use the word virtue signaling. And so yeah, when you push for the appearance of goodness rather than the substance of goodness, it's about power. So this is a line that obviously everyone's saying it these days, which is great because there's a more concerted pushback. But yeah, this is exactly what Lewis Carroll was battling in his own day. So I've got a few quotes. Oh yeah, sorry, fun fact. I went through too quickly. Lewis Carroll's real name, Charles Lutwidge Dodgson.
Hmm. I didn't know
Have you
that.
heard of that one before?
No.
It's so funny. You can't even say it really. Charles Lutwidge Dodgson. Like it doesn't come out easy. And then Lewis Carroll.
Yeah.
It's
You
quite
picked a good
beautiful.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a lovely transformation. Um, and it's interesting because this was at the dawn of photography as well. And so we have all these photographs of Carroll and indeed photographs that Carroll took. And it creates this mythology about who he was. That's a whole nother lecture. There's a thing called the Carroll myth, which is a sort of a fake vision of what he is. He was quite possibly more normal than we think, but we kind of imagine he's this strange, removed, ethereal guy who was friends with young children, but not in a dodgy way. And, he was friends with young children, but yeah, this is sort of mythology. Anyway, I won't get into all of that. But yeah, Alice in Wonderland, 1865, sort of a tumultuous time, right around the time of Darwin's Origin of Species coming out. So there's a lot of tie-ins with that, questioning religion. So yeah, and then Through the Looking Glass, the second book, came out in 1871. This is just a bit of background. And this is real life Alice. So yeah, there was a real life Alice Liddell. And so Lewis Carroll was friends with the family. They had 3 daughters. At one point, he took them on a boat trip. And the youngest daughter, Alice Liddell, was the one I guess he had the best relationship with. And so the Alice in the stories is based on her. So written for her. Anyway, a bit of background here. But yeah, just a few quotes as well. Woke is eternal. I sort of said that already. But just to give a bit of background to just a bit more framing for what I'm about to talk about with the poems. So this is Beverly Lyon Clark. She's someone who's written about Lewis Carroll some years ago now, decades ago really. But she says Carroll in a lot of his poems is criticizing the literary purpose of didactic verse, the way in which it tried to control children. So in middle class or upper class Victorian England, there were these poems which were, and I'll show you some of them, they're kind of grotesque. They make you kind of want to retch. And children often had to learn these and say their poems back to make them into nice, well-behaved, good citizens, which is kind of like what goes on with woke today. You've got to say all the words and repeat them all so that you show you're a nice, good citizen. It's remarkably similar. And so, yeah, Carroll sensed the disingenuousness of it. And slayed it, basically. The parodies would also seem to shatter the closed universes of the pietistic poems they mock. I like these words, didactic, pietistic. So, pious obviously means religious, but it's also, religion's often fine, but when you're too pious, you're morally righteous. But I like this, the parodies shatter the closed universes. When I think of this, I think of even comedians today like Dave Chappelle, or Bill Burr or Ricky Gervais. These are sort of the people who shatter the closed universes of wokeness or political correctness. So, these are, I keep bringing all of these, different contemporary links up because, yeah, again, it just sort of shows dealing with this eternal process, which is really cool. Mawkish, another word. Excessively sentimental, emotional in an insincere or sickly way. So again, this is the kind of stuff that Lewis Carroll was picking up on. Anyway, enough background. Let's get to it. So yeah, there's a poet, David Bates. People don't really talk about him much, but he was big in the day, 1865 or before that. And he had this poem called "Speak Gently," and it's quite interesting because when I read the poem again, it's like I don't really disagree with the sentiment, but there's something utterly grotesque about the poem, which is worthy of criticism. Anyway, I'll put up a few of the stanzas. Maybe you can let me know what you think as well. Speak gently, it is better far to rule by love than fear. Speak gently, let no harsh word mar the good we may do here. So, be nice. Be nice. Speak gently to the little child, its love be sure to gain. Teach it in accents soft and mild, it may not long remain. It's kind of heavy. Be nice to children, they're going to die. Speak gently to the young, for they will have enough to bear. Pass through this life as best they may, 'tis full of anxious care. We talk about, the anxiety generation or whatever. Sometimes I ponder whether that's actually the case, David Bates is saying, young people are anxious, be nice to them. It's kind of funny. Speak gently to the aged one. Grieve not the careworn heart, whose sands of life are nearly run. Let such in peace depart. Be nice to old people. They're going to die.
Yeah. It's got a
There's
lot of
just,
sadness to it.
but yeah, but there's just still something so off about it.
Mm-hmm.
Something sort of, again, mawkish,
Mm-hmm.
sickly, sentimental, sort of disingenuous, where I get the feeling that maybe the author cares, but you just get that sense that the author's virtue signaling and trying to look good and trying to wag his finger at everyone and tell them to behave and be nice. And then you can also imagine then that young children, people of Alice's age, I guess it's also tied up with adults who are the same way. Again, as I say, getting the children to learn these poems and then recite them as if by doing that, they then become good. So it's like this whole,
Mm-hmm.
morality control system.
Interesting.
And so, yeah. So, when you read Alice, Wonderland's just crazy and chaotic. That's sort of the attraction, yeah?
It's wild instead of being
Yeah.
so rigid.
Mm. And a lot of the characters in Wonderland are kind of like adults, and they tell Alice to, come on, recite your poem. But they're not adults. Like the caterpillars, like a bong smoking, God knows what, like totally irresponsible. And so you have these adult figures who you'd never trust in a million years, still acting all morally upright.
Mm-hmm.
Which takes us back to Elon, the appearance of goodness while doing evil. You think, God, you people are not worthy adults. And so they make Alice in the novel recite the poems. And then what's great, not this one, this one's a little different, but the next one I'll show you, Old Father William, she recites them but gets them wrong in a way that parodies the original poem. Anyway, but I won't go through the rest of this, but you get the gist of it, and it's quite long. And then when Alice meets the Duchess, we get this poem, Speak Roughly. So this is the one that turns up in Wonderland, and it just goes, speak roughly to your little boy and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy because he knows it teases. And that's it. Well, there's a second verse, but that's it.
Uh-huh.
And so, the original one's long and drawn out and painful and boring and finger waggy. And this one's just saying, nah, you should beat your children. Which, of course, is not what he means. But in saying that, he's, drawing attention to the miserable sort of pious original poem.
Mm-hmm.
He's trolling.
That's a great contrast.
Yeah. I don't know, should I roll on?
Yeah, this is great.
But yeah, I mean, these are sort of staggering depths when you can read the stories and you come across this poem, you're like, well, this is a little odd and dark, but okay. But then, yeah, you sort of see what's going on with it. Yeah. I mean, this one's even better, really. As a parody, this one's, amazingly good. So yeah, Robert Southey. There's a poem from back in the day, The Old Man's Comforts and How He Gained Them. Already the title's a little bit syrupy, but it's basically, the setup is, there's a young man who's talking to an old man, and the young man keeps saying, hey, old man, why are you so healthy? Why are you doing so well even though you're old and you've got no hair and you're going to die? And the young man's not trying to be funny, but it's funny. And the old man says, well, I was religious and I didn't drink too much and I didn't party too much and all of that, which, as I say, are sentiments I largely endorse. But when they're put into this didactic verse form, they become grotesque and insincere. And so, yeah, when you look at the original and then the parody, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, that's right. This is like a drugs are bad MK type thing. Which again, as I say, I endorse. I'm not a fan of drugs, but there's something ineffectual and pathetic, about the Mr. Mackey character.
Bit propagandistic.
Propagandistic. And then again, possibly even more to the point, the people that tell you all these things don't even live virtuous lives themselves, which is always, the real kicker. They're not better people. So I don't know. These are the challenges. These are the great moral challenges that we that we face. But anyway, let's have a look at some of these. It is really funny. "You are old, Father William," the young man cried. I mean, who says that to old people? "The few locks which are left you are grey. You don't have any hair and they're grey. You are hale, Father William, a hearty old man. Now tell me the reason, I pray." So it's not meant to be funny, but it's funny. The old man says, "In the days of my youth," Father William replied, "I remembered that youth would fly fast, and abused not my health and my vigour at first, that I never might need them at last. So when I was young, I lived a good, clean life."
It's very moralistic.
Very moralistic. It actually reminds me, now that I think of it, you ever watch Seinfeld?
Oh, yes.
Do you remember the episode where the characters got assigned an old person?
Oh, no, I don't remember
No?
that.
And George got assigned an old guy, and the whole time George kept saying to the old man, "Aren't you worried about dying? You're so old, you're gonna die."
Oh my God.
And the old man, he said George was such a downer, he had to get rid of him.
Yeah.
That's
what this sounds like.
That's what it sounds like. There's
Yeah.
this young guy who keeps telling, but of course it's totally fake. Why would the old man endorse what the young man's saying? It's not real. The young man carries on. This is what's so funny. "You are old, Father William." It's like he's already said it. The young man cried, "and pleasures with youth pass away." It's like, you're old and your life's not fun.
Yeah.
"And yet you lament not the days that are gone. Now tell me the reason, I pray. You're old and your life sucks. Why don't you complain?"
Yeah.
Thanks, young man.
Yeah, it's a very unrealistic way to address someone.
Yeah, and so again, keep in mind, this is the kind of poems that young people are being exposed to and having to recite. It's, ridiculous. Anyway, the young man goes on, blah, blah, blah. So the young man starts again. "You are old, Father William," the young man cried, "and life must be hastening away." This is the George Costanza bit. "You're old, you're going to die. And yet you're cheerful. And you love to converse upon death. Now tell me the reason, I pray." Anyway, it's it's very funny, but it's not meant to be funny. So yeah, this is what turns up when Alice is talking to the caterpillar and he forces her to recite the poem whilst, as I say, smoking whatever the hell he's smoking and, being not particularly responsible or caring in any way. So yeah, Carroll's parody. It's interesting as well. Carroll calls it "You are old, Father William." So he actually picks up that funny repeated line as that's kind of like the title. "You are old, Father William," the young man said, "and your hair has become very white. And yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think at your age it is right?" So you see the switch up is that in this poem, the old man is, the Dylan Thomas poem, "Do not go gentle into that good night."
Yeah, this
Yeah, it's
man's
like
not
another-
going gentle.
Yeah, he's living and this is what, 50 years before Dylan Thomas's poem, more than that, 70 years or something. He is absolutely living old age, and the young man is wagging his finger at him and telling him he should behave himself and be a proper old man. Which in a way sort of feels realer in a sense. With, again, when I say woke is eternal, I mean, so often what we're seeing these days is the young generation wagging their finger at the older generation and telling them they're doing it all wrong.
Oh my goodness, that's such a good point.
And I even get this, I feel, I don't know, I felt young for quite some time, but yeah, after some experiences last year at university, I'm like, oh my God, I'm now just one of those old guys that the young people wag their fingers at and say I'm doing it wrong because I talk about Monty Python or something like that, and lament the good old 90s when you could actually say stuff,
Yeah. Yeah. So true.
the era of, yeah. So anyway, "You are old, Father William," the young man said. Anyway, Father William says, in my youth, Father William replied to his son, I feared it might injure the brain, but now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why I do it again and again. And this next bit, I mean, this is why I love poetry so much. Just these subtle touches. You are old, said the youth, as I mentioned before. So whereas the original poem just keeps saying, you are old, Father William, you are old, Father William, you are old, Father. This one says, you are old, said the youth, as I mentioned before, which then brilliantly mocks the previous poem. And you've grown most uncommonly fat, yet you turned a back somersault in at the door. Pray, what is the reason for that? It runs on. I mean, I won't go through the entirety of it, but maybe I'll point out the end of it. You were old, said the youth. One would hardly suppose that your eye was as steady as ever, yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever? And then the old man, this is again like the Seinfeld episode. I have answered 3 questions and that is enough, said his father. Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off or I'll kick you downstairs. And that's the brilliant finish.
Yeah.
Like, how do we deal with this, with the crazy, pietistic, mawkish, didactic, woke world? How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? Maybe you just go, you know what? Enough of this bullshit. Shut up. I don't know, but that's the response.
That's excellent. Excellent.
Like how gloriously timeless.
I've always loved this one. This is a favorite. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what's funny is that I remember this from my childhood. I remember having my copy of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I remember poring over the poems, and I remember this one, and then you forget about it for a while, and then I came back to it in adulthood, and you know, there it was vividly in my mind, and then you study it and you realize how much depth it actually has. And there's probably a reason, even as a child, that we are drawn to it, because we recognize in it a kind of, you know, unruliness, a kind of, you know, it's irrepressible in a sense. It's saying the things you're not meant to say. All of that.
And so cleverly.
Yeah. And so, you know, that's one of the, you know, the many glories. One of the great questions which I still struggle to answer is, you know, why do some works endure and why do some not? And then what is the nature of the knowledge contained in the works that endure? And it's not easy to answer because, you know, you're talking about psychology before. In psychology, you do a study, you know, you get some groups, you have placebos, you have double blind, whatever, and that then allows you to make knowledge claims. And yet we venerate literature, we teach it, but it's a lot harder to say, why this particular work? Why does this count as knowledge? Why is this worthy of enduring? It's a tough question.
It is. I'd never read the original poem. That I didn't realize this was a parody. And it is really interesting what it's pointing out here, what he's pointing out with this.
Yeah, so the point is we read it and we recognize the patterns, as well as the fact that it's a wonderfully well-written poem. It's flawless. But we recognize the patterns, and then I guess people like me come along and convince people like you to let me talk about it, and then a bunch of people listen and they go, you know what, I'm convinced. And then on it rolls. It's sort of a beautiful, different kind of knowledge tradition, really.
Yeah, it is interesting to wonder what endures and what does not.
Yeah. Yeah, and why. And so in a sense, it's like the test of time. There's something in the test of time. It's not all just a conspiracy, you know, which is how the postmodernists would have it, you know, that somehow things that endure because, yeah, it's, I don't know, Western patriarchy or something pushing it along. I don't buy it. I think these things talk to us at a deep level, really, and yeah, something like that.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and it neatly ties into the point you were making earlier about patterns and how we repeat our patterns. I think that if we are real if we're honest with ourselves about our nature and our history, we will see that we do repeat these patterns over and over. And perhaps some of the works that stand the test of time do so because they're pointing out some things that are really, truly enduring.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And that's the beauty of it all. That's the quest for knowledge, the quest for beauty, the quest for truth, the
Mhm.
big three.
Mhm.
Anyway, let me see. What else have I got? This is a long one, but uh, it's I know there's shorter and longer versions, but oh, what the heck? I mean, I've come this far, yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So the first couple are, as I say, attacking the woke or the politically correct of the day. What I like about this is that in this one, and the poem, the particular Lewis Carroll poem, this turns up at the end of the second Alice novel, and people know it less. But for my money, it's just about the best of them all. And he's making fun of Wordsworth. So the point is, no, he's not just taking aim at, do-gooders,
Mhm.
basically. He's also having a go at Wordsworth, which is great in a way because it shows that he doesn't have a particular political agenda. It shows that he just senses disingenuousness and fakeness or whatever, wherever it is, and he'll come for it, which is quite beautiful, really. So, I mean, like I love poetry, but I've always struggled with Wordsworth. I
Mhm.
don't know. Have you attempted Wordsworth much?
Not very much. I really loved, I had one particular course in undergrad where we did a lot of English literature, and so I
Yeah,
came into a little bit of Wordsworth, but never has been a particular favorite of mine.
yeah. So like I've gone into him again and again, and I'm like, everyone says Wordsworth's great, but I just struggle. I mean, I'm sorry to the Wordsworth fans out there. And there are a few bits and pieces I like, but I find him long-winded,
Mhm.
verbose, self-indulgent. Um, yeah. And anyway, the point is he's got this poem Resolution and Independence, which goes on and on. And I don't know, it's so funny to me. Again, apologies to Wordsworth fans, but the Wordsworth character is wandering the moors, as they
Mhm.
do in English literature.
Mhm.
He's
Mhm.
wandering the moors and he's having these visions of his youth, and then he's getting unbelievably sad and melancholic and oh, oh dear, the emotions, and he comes across an old man who's collecting leeches. So basically he's the poorest of the poor, late in his old age, wandering the rainy moors, the cold moors, to collect leeches to, I guess, sell them to doctors or something, whatever they did with leeches back then. And he has this conversation with him, but he really doesn't seem to, give a shit about the leech gatherer.
Mhm.
And that's what's so funny. He's just this sort of self-indulgent, you know. It's funny because in a way, yeah, I mean, it's a class comment, He's just
Mhm.
this kind of, I mean, I don't know exactly how well off Wordsworth was, but no doubt he was doing okay for himself. You could spend a life writing poems, Life's
Mhm.
pretty good. Anyway, I'll give you a few. I won't read that out. I'll keep moving. But I'll give you a few bits and pieces from the Wordsworth poem. I mean, I skipped out a whole lot of stanzas because it goes on. But third stanza. I was a traveller then upon the moor. I saw the hare that raced about with joy. I heard the woods as distant waters roar, or heard them not, as happy as a boy. So, you hear stuff, but when you're a child, you're immersed in your environment, so you don't notice anything. You're present, you live in the moment.
Mhm.
People are always saying that's what's great about being a kid, I don't know. My kids seem to complain and cry and whinge a lot, so I'm not quite sure how glorious it is. You know what I mean?
Uh,
They fight a lot.
yeah.
The pleasant season did my heart employ. My old remembrances went from me wholly, and all the ways of men, so vain and melancholy.
Mm.
Even that rhyme I find funny. It makes me want to
Mhm.
laugh. It just
Mhm.
doesn't work.
Not
But he's
quite
like,
right.
yeah, earnest. So he's like, I thought of, you know, all my old memories and all the terrible things that people do, but which make me sad. And, you know, because I was carried away in the moment. And that's the funny thing is like, I agree with that sentiment. Like when I was talking about Shakespeare last time, Sonnet 66 starts with, tired with all these for restful death I cry. It's like, the world sucks, I want to die. Somehow it doesn't bug me when Shakespeare says it. But
Mm,
when Wordsworth says it, it bugs me.
mm,
Funny that.
mm.
I'll roll on. You'll get the gist pretty quickly. But as it sometimes chanceth, as it happens, from the might of joy in minds that can no further go, as high as we have mounted in delight, in our dejection do we sink as low. So I was having all these, I was feeling really good. And then I felt so good. And then I started thinking about it and became self-aware. And then I felt sad. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. To me that morning did it happen so, and fears and fancies thick upon me came, dim sadness and blind thoughts I knew not nor could name.
Mm,
He was wandering on the moors, he then started feeling sad.
mhm.
Anyway, yes, yes. So he comes across this old man, the leech gatherer. He says, "Good morning to you, old man." Then we get to stanza 13. A gentle answer did the old man make, in courteous speech, which forth he slowly drew. And him with further words I thus bespake. What occupation do you there pursue? This is a lonesome place for one like you. So he's like, well, what are you doing out here? This is pretty lonely. I guess so far so good. He told me that to these waters he had come to gather leeches, being old and poor. So on and so forth. And yeah, he finds housing wherever he can. Basically, his life is hard. We get to 16, and this is when it, for Lewis Carroll, this is when it gets particularly funny.
Mm.
He says, "The old man still stood talking by my side, but now his voice to me was like a stream, scarce heard, nor word from word could I divide." He stops listening.
Wow.
The old man starts talking, and he just stops listening, and he's just like, yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. That's
Yeah,
really,
yeah,
yeah.
it's yeah, far out. And then he just starts thinking about himself
Yeah.
some more. Um, and so he stops listening, and then in stanza 17, he says, yeah, oh, my former thoughts return, the fear that kills the hope. He's like, he's feeling sad again, obsessed with himself. It's amazing that Wordsworth wrote this into the poem and didn't even quite realize what he was doing, you know?
Huh.
And so at the end of 17, he says, my question eagerly did I renew. How is it that you live? And what is it you do? He just asked him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he stopped listening. And now he asks him again. Doesn't care.
Well, he sees the man as a vehicle for himself here. And that's really interesting. Like in that stanza 16, where he's saying, and the whole body of the man did seem like one whom I had met within a dream. So he's not even real. He's a figment now. He's just a plot device
Yeah.
to give me human strength.
Which is pretty sad because like, how about you give the old man some money and take him in or something? I don't know. You know, how about you help him or something like that? But no, that's not what occurs. And so anyway, it rolls on. I won't, yeah, you get the gist of it, which sort of brings me back to this quote that I skipped over before. Carroll writes this parody, this response called Sitting on a Gate, which, as I say, few poems make me happier than this. He says it's a parody, though not as to style or meter, but its plot is borrowed from Wordsworth's Resolution and Independence, a poem that has always amused me a good deal, though it is by no means a comic poem. So Carroll's saying, Resolution and Independence always made me laugh, even though obviously it wasn't trying to be funny. You know, by the absurd way in which the poet goes on questioning the poor old leech gatherer, making him tell his history over and over again, and never attending to what he says. Wordsworth ends with a moral, an example I have not followed. How deep is that?
That's it. Yeah.
I think again of Seinfeld. Isn't that interesting? But maybe Seinfeld was in many ways emblematic of the 90s and of a different approach.
Mhm.
You know, from memory, Seinfeld had a motto, the makers of Seinfeld, um, something like no hugs and no morals.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't know, if you think about 80s sitcoms,
Mhm.
things like Family Ties and I don't know, all the other ones who I can't remember, it was so about families and everyone always ends up hugging and they
Mm.
always end up learning a lesson. So like as Tarantino says, the 80s was like politically correct light,
Mm.
whereas where we are now is like politically correct heavy, you know? So there's sort of a relationship between the 90s and the 80s and maybe hopefully what's going to come next when
Mm.
the when the anti-woke revolution really takes off. But what am I saying? What am I saying? That's right. Yeah. So Seinfeld really tried to avoid morals, and so you know all the characters in Seinfeld, they're grotesque, they're selfish.
Mm.
We kind of like them, but at the same time, we also know they're dark. But
Mhm.
that's the charm of the show.
That's interesting. You're drawing a parallel there between what the function that Seinfeld is performing in its time to what Carroll is performing, in contrast to the, as you say, mawkish, like overly sentimental and moralistic
Mm.
literature and entertainment that would have come just before.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting because you see these patterns again and again,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
that's why I'm becoming. I mean, I suspect it's just because that was my youth, but I'm, you know, such a
mhm.
damn 90s fan. Like Simpsons initially, South Park,
Mhm,
Tarantino, Seinfeld, they all were sort of far more morally ambivalent, you know? And
mhm.
partly they were attacking the 80s that came before, you know, Beavis and Butthead. You know, they're attacking the 80s that came before, but then maybe they're also giving us a truer account of the human condition.
And yet, when you see how far things have gone now, and in terms of cultural degradation,
Yeah.
I almost miss the more the more family oriented
Oh, I know,
and,
right? Well, how interesting is that?
uh,
Yes. So what we would call moral degradation, which I thoroughly agree with, it's not even moral, which is why,
mhm,
you know, the 80s stuff where it's just hugs and families. Yeah, I mean, my God, I'd take that any day over what
mhm.
we call good today,
Right,
for sure.
right. Mhm. Yeah, that's very
Yeah,
interesting.
these are dark days in yeah, in that sense, for sure. So anyway, la la la, yes, yes, yes. So yeah, us sitting on a gate.
Okay.
So again, this comes from the end of the second Alice novel, Through the Looking Glass.
Mhm.
Which you know, a lot can be said about that too. But it's a funny sort of book because it's the sequel, and it's got some really high points in it, but it's got some low points, and he can't even finish it. The last two or three chapters are like one-line chapters. You could sort of almost feel that Lewis Carroll's creative spirit has kind of burnt out, and he
Mhm.
only had about two-thirds of a book in him the second time round. But that, I
Yeah.
mean, that's a whole other discussion. Anyway, this is great. So so what happens is whoever's reciting the poem, it's not yeah, it's another character is actually giving this poem now. It's not Alice.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, uh, anyway, I'll go for it. I'll well, also wait, hang on, one more thing. Sorry, there's always one more thing. This is iambic pentameter, isn't it? My former thoughts return the fear that kills. 5 beats per line. It's more ponderous, it's slower, it's deeper. That's how often the iambic pentameter feels. You know, Shakespeare's writing an iambic pentameter. Whereas this one, I'll tell thee everything I can, there's little to relate. I saw it's faster.
Mhm.
It's the 4 beats. But yeah, which isn't in itself makes it more comical because you want to say it faster, and by saying it faster, you're kind of making fun of the original. Anyway,
Mhm.
I'll tell thee everything I can. There's little to relate. I saw an aged man a sitting on a gate. That's the leech gatherer, except here he's sitting on a gate. Who are you, aged man? I said, and how is it you live? And his answer trickled through my head like water through a sieve.
Wow.
So he gets right down to it as well. Resolution and independence takes forever to get to the leech gatherer. Goes
Yeah.
on and on and on. And this just gets right to the point. I met an old man, you know, who are you? What do you do? Now I'm not listening.
Well, it's nice. I like that the brevity also, it seems to point out the pretentiousness of the prior
Yeah,
poem. Mm.
yeah. He said, I look for butterflies that sleep among the wheat. I make them into mutton pies and sell them in the street. I sell them unto men, he said, who sail on stormy seas. And that's the way I get my bread. A trifle, if you please. It's nonsense now.
Mhm.
That's part of the charm. Um, and then he keeps not listening. I just got to move the control bar. But I was thinking of a plan to dye one's whiskers green. He's thinking how he could dye his beard. And always use so large a fan that they could not be seen. So having no reply to give to what the old man said, I cried, come tell me how you live, and thumped him on the head.
Oh,
I just love that.
wow.
He's not listening. And then he just does again. Ha, what? Hey, how do you live? Listen.
Yeah.
He's the one who doesn't care. And yet he's projecting, he's then, making the older man as if he has the problems,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is such a typical human thing to do, especially, what's so, the word narcissism is never far from our lips, is it, these days?
Yeah.
Senses we're in this narcissistic age. But this is exactly what he's making fun of, the narcissism of Wordsworth, the narcissism of the rich person who doesn't care about the poor person.
Mhm.
It goes on. His accents mild took up the tale. He said, I go my ways, and when I find a mountain rill, I set it in a blaze. And thence they make a stuff they call Roland's Macassar oil. Yet 2p halfpenny is all they give me for my toil. So he's making up, this is the 19th century. They always had remedies and ointments and stuff like that,
Mhm.
quackery. But yeah,
We do too. We just call it pharma now.
we call it pharma. Yeah, I know. Or there's so much dodgy self-help stuff going on everywhere, and
Mhm.
it's funny. Yeah, again, it's amazing how little things change again. But he wasn't listening. But I was thinking of a way to feed oneself on batter, and so go on from day to day, getting a little fatter. Have you ever been through that where you eat something that's battered and you're like, my God, I like batter, and then
Yeah.
you try to just eat the batter, and then you feel really sick?
It's like cookie dough. Yeah.
It's like cookie dough, yeah. Same issues. He wished he could eat more batter. It reminds me as well of that meme from 10 or so, 12, 13 years ago, first world problems,
Mm. Mm.
which is actually quite funny. I'm no fan of West bashing and, capitalism bashing. Obviously, we do it way too much. But there's, still something to be said for first world problems. I don't know, maybe a lot of the stuff that the woke crowd complain about is also in a way you'd call first world problems. So
Yeah, well, he's making a class distinction here because this
yeah,
man is telling him I can barely scrape by.
yeah,
And here he is. Well, I could eat batter all day and get really
yeah,
fat. He's thinking of these kind of frivolous, self-pleasuring
frivolous.
things. Yeah.
So that links very much with whatever we're battling today. These people who are caught up in these trivial things and that's maybe I mentioned this last time, but that's one of the fundamental criticisms of the culture wars is that, for my money, the left is fine when it worries about class issues because, rich people do try to get more money, like it's
Yeah.
obvious down through history. So when the left actually focuses on class concerns and that exist in reality, that's fine. That's a good job. But yeah, when it deals with these sort of trivialities and dalliances, it becomes grotesque and twisted. So look how beautifully this is embodied in this poem from 150 years ago. Same issues. I don't know. I'll skip through a couple of these. Oh yeah. So the second last one here, he says, the old man says, and very gladly will I drink your honor's noble health. So the old man's talking about what he's done, and he's like, well, next time I buy a beer, I'll remember you and drink your health. And then the persona says, I heard him then, for I had just completed my design to keep the men I bridge from rust by boiling it in wine. I thanked him much for telling me the way he got his wealth, but chiefly for his wish that he might drink my noble health.
Hmm.
Only time he listened was when the old man said, I'll think of you next time I drink a beer. It's the
Wow.
only time he listened.
Yeah. I only hear you when you're reflecting me.
Very, very funny.
Yeah.
Um, and I love this last bit. Again, the trivialities. Ugh. And now, if ever, by chance I put my fingers into glue, or madly squeeze a right-hand foot into a left-hand shoe, or if I drop upon my toe a very heavy weight, I weep, for it reminds me so of that old man I used to know, whose look was mild, whose speech was slow, whose hair was whiter than the snow, whose face was very like a crow, with eyes like cinders all aglow, who seemed distracted with his woe, who rocked his body to and fro, and muttered mumbling and low, as if his mouth were full of dough, who snorted like a buffalo that summer evening long ago, a sitting on a gate. It's mad, but again, first world problems, or let's not say first world problems, let's say rich people's problems. You know, when you put your finger into glue, or you put your shoe on the wrong foot, or you hurt your toe.
Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. These are the problems of my life, these little bitty inconsequential irritations. And whenever I'm irritated with some little
Yeah.
inconvenience, I think about this man who who toiled just to scrape it together.
Yeah, who he didn't really care about anyway.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really brilliant parody.
Yeah. And so, yeah, when you read the second Alice book, you read the poem, you sort of pay attention to it, but you don't really. But when you understand what's actually going on is this the deep engagement with Wordsworth. Oh, hang on, sorry.
No, it's a very it's very illuminating. I had never read that original, so this really
Yeah.
draws out a lot. It's like you're
So yeah,
missing you're missing a whole lot if you don't know what the reference material is.
yeah. And like so often, I don't know, often in literature, knowing what the reference material is, you read the footnote and you're like, well, that's obscure. It doesn't always help. But I feel like in the case of the Alice novels, knowing the source material just makes them so much better and just shows all the more why, yeah, they've stood the test of time. And I mean, there's, as I say, there's so much more to be said. There's a semester's worth of other
Yeah.
things to talk about, but that's part of it. Maybe I'll just finish with a very short stanza. Um, this one's not mocking. And maybe this is also why Lewis Carroll or the Alice novels do so well, is that, and I suppose you see this in something like Shakespeare as well, and I often ponder this, comedy, tragedy, the two great parts of life. And, the right way, middle path, yeah? The right way is to mix them both. The right way is to acknowledge tragedy for what it is, but then to also be able to laugh hugely, immensely. And so in the Alice novels, you've got a lot of comedy, a lot of trolling, a lot of satire, but then you also have very serious, poignant stuff. And again, it's the combination of those two things in one work, which again makes it really soar. So before the first book and before the second book, there's a poem which we often skip over. And I won't talk about the first poem, but before the second book, it's 1871. So the first one was 1865. By then, Alice Little would have been, I don't know, 9 or 10 when the book came out in 1865. By 1871, Alice Little is, what, 16 or 17? Essentially a woman, grown up. And so one of the themes that runs through all of the Alice novels is the loss of childhood. So the Alice novels are part of this romantic conception of childhood, which some people criticize, but which I kind of like. But yeah, so I won't show you all of the poem, but the poem bemoans, or not bemoans, well, bemoans, yeah. Laments, that's the word I'm looking for, laments the loss of childhood. It says, a child of the pure unclouded brow and dreaming eyes of wonder, Though time be fleet, and I and thou are half a life asunder.
Hmm.
This loving smile will surely hail the love gift of a fairy tale. He's basically saying you and I are half a life asunder. So I showed you the picture of little Alice Little before. She's really cute, you know? And now she's grown up and they're gone, which isn't entirely true because they did stay in contact, but that's the sense of just this loss of childhood. I have not seen thy sunny face nor heard thy silver laughter. No thought of me shall find a place in thy young life's hereafter. So you're going to forget me. Enough that that now thou wilt not fail to listen to my fairy tale. But this is the this next stand. I skip a bit, but this one really blows me away. I always come back to it. He joins a lot of ideas. Then he says, "Come, hearken then, ere voice of dread with bitter tidings laden shall summon to unwelcome bed a melancholy maiden. We are but older children, dear, who fret to find our bedtime near." So he's saying, listen to my poem. You're going to get married soon. But it's interesting that he refers to marriage as an unwelcome bed. So touching on what we talked a bit about last time, at least from Lewis Carroll's point of view, he's sort of seeing marriage as a sort of death. Interesting. He didn't get married himself. So
he sees it as an end of childhood freedom.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. But then there's this line here. This is the one that really blows me away. He says, "We are but older children, dear, who fret to find our bedtime near." I mean, you know yourself with 4 kids, they don't want to go to bed a lot of the time. They always carry on. I want to stay up. I want to stay up. And he's linking that with once you're an adult and you become conscious of death, death is our bedtime. We are but older children, dear, who fret to find our bedtime near.
It's a really chilling, beautiful metaphor.
And you could skip over that when you're reading the second Alice novel, you know? You're just like, yes, a poem. Let's get to the story. But yeah, these themes of death, growing up, growing old, weave through it all. You get that a lot in Shakespeare's sonnets as well. It's just a very, very simple everyday concern. Growing old, the loss of beauty, death, being forgotten. Yet more reasons why these poems and these books endure. That's mostly what I wanted to say about Lewis Carroll. We've gone on a bit.
No, I love this. This is it's fascinating. I forgot we were recording this for a little bit. I'm just getting really into the
awesome.
discussion. So yeah. No, it's
just like the old man on the moors, we got carried away in the moment.
Yeah. No, I think this is wonderful, and these themes are so eternal and familiar.
Yeah. And presented in a way that just makes them just hit all the more sharply, and gives us a degree of comfort. But I don't know, I don't know what the word is, but we do like truth, some of us. And when you sort of see these turning themes and these deep human preoccupations and these human follies as well, you know, there's something I don't know, empowering about it as well.
You said something last time we spoke about truth, about wanting to seek truth and speak the truth, but also having this humility around that. Like, how do I even know that what I'm speaking and seeking is the truth?
Yeah.
And I thought that was really, there's so much in that statement that I think would merit further exploration. And I've had that same thought myself, because you find things that are jarring to you and you think, well, this isn't right. This violates my conscience. I can't go along with this. And I want to be able to speak what I believe to be true. But then what is my own apparatus for assessing that in terms of morality and in terms of values and judgments and right relationship?
Yeah. I mean, this is like the question. But you know, I feel like the answers in what you just, even in what you said, is that this compulsion to speak what you believe is the truth. So there's humility in that. But the compulsion to speak is the compulsion to test your hypothesis with other people. And so in wanting to speak, in wanting to enter into dialogue, the humility is already there in the right sort of way, because you're like, oh man, I've got this feeling. It doesn't feel right. I need to talk about this. I need to talk about it. And then you talk about it and other people will be like, yeah, I see that. You know, this is how we've evolved. This is the glory of language. This is the, you know, the glory of truth. So, which this is like, you know, the intellectual dark web, which I've done the book about, which hopefully will republish again soon. I mean, this is the fundamental message. This is the fundamental message of free speech, is that it's through entering into dialogue that we have humility and test our ideas, which is very different. Think again of the Lewis Carroll poems. I mean, it's great how this ties back in. The young people are not entering into dialogue. They're being told to shut up and recite the verse. So yeah, I feel like, I mean, yeah, the truth question, the morality question, how do we assess it? I don't know. It's savage. It's brutal. Yeah, it's certainly my life's focus. But yeah, we talk, don't we? So yeah, that's the best we have in a way. Obviously, we have the scientific method for things that are more testable, but otherwise we have, yeah, discussion, dialogue, literature.
That's such a useful framework. That's such a useful perspective. Thank you. Do you have more slides, or should we stop this slideshow?
That's it for Lewis Carroll. I had the other one, but you know, maybe we could do that another time.
Okay.
Philip Larkin.
Well, there we go. There was one other thing that you said last time that I hoped to ask you about a little more, and maybe we could save that for another discussion. I don't know, but
Up to you.
You mentioned something about, oh gosh, I wish I had written it down so I'd have the exact quote. But basically it's something about a way, we need another kind of communication technology or infrastructure to help us manage the scale of our communication now. And there was some, maybe I'll go back and I'll try to pull that out. And if we do another conversation, I'll ask you about that, because I have thought about this a lot. We have such a gift in this mass communication that we've established. It's so amazing what it opens up for us. Like, I'm in Washington State and you're in Australia and we can have this conversation. That's really cool. And I talk to people who are all over the world,
Yeah.
and I know people who are far away from where I live that I would never be able to know or talk to if we didn't have this ability to communicate. And yet also the mass communication brings so many problems, from the problems that we talk about with kids and social media, to internet addiction, to just the sort of anonymity and inherent dehumanization in the way that we connect with many other people online. So it's this enormous thing that has as much good as it has bad, and as much bad as it has good, and yet it's here to stay. And so we have to find a way to use it as responsibly and as healthfully as we possibly can. So anyway, I wanted to kind of enter into a dialogue with you around that, but perhaps, unless you have some thoughts you want to share on that right now, perhaps we could save that and talk at length another time.
Yeah, I mean, we can another time. I mean, when I hear you talk, I think, yeah, that beast is certainly beyond me. I mean, you overly regulate it, and then you end up with too many problems. You let it be free, you end up with too many problems.
Yeah.
It's a complex solution that we're looking for. I mean, but yeah, we're all addicted to our phones. I mean, I don't know. I'm a relatively strong-willed person. I start projects and I finish them, and I'm driven. I can't get off my phone, and I don't even really go on social media. I'm just talking to friends. Like I generally avoid social media, the mass stuff, you know. But even still, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an amazing mixed blessing.
It
The
is.
best and the worst.
Yeah, it is. And I'd be interested in your perspective on it as someone who studies history and literature and human
Mm,
behavior over time because of I think that there are as many perspectives on this as there are people probably right
mm,
now. But
sure.
I'm kind of wondering, how does this fit with previous human behavioral patterns, and how does it offer something that's entirely new? And
Yeah,
again,
that's one of the
that's
big questions. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I could think a lot about it. I mean, my initial response is what I guess other people have said as well, is that perhaps it amplifies a little bit.
mhm.
But even then, I don't know. I'm not so sure. It's so easy to look at your current moment and catastrophize about it when, I mean, obviously phone and internet addiction is a real thing. So that's definitely something different, but possibly what we're going through is more familiar than not still. But yeah, yeah, I have to think about it some more.
You
Write down some.
mentioned you mentioned that your book might be published, so that's very exciting to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. I mean, to basically get, I don't know, soft cancelled. I kind of got this idea of hard cancellation and soft cancellation. Hard cancellations when the mob really comes for you. And soft cancellations just when a whole, bunch of kind of crappy stuff happens and you just get sort of too stressed out or too pissed off and you just can't, keep going on. So I think the book kind of went through that really.
Seems like a hard
Yeah,
cancellation to me to have it withdrawn from publication after it was already
yeah,
published.
okay.
That's pretty
I'm
hard.
trying not to be too dramatic,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's easy. But yeah, look, yeah, nothing's signed yet, but it's looking like it's looking like at this point that I found another publisher and one that I'm very happy with. So let's hopefully in the next week or so that'll unfold and yeah, the book can find an audience because God knows the whole intellectual dark web thing, Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Ben Shapiro, and 50 other Elon Musk, 50 or 60, 70, 100 other people, heck, people like you know, through the generations. Like it's as you say, even tied up with the internet. It's a remarkable phenomenon that's worth documenting. So we'll see. But things
Absolutely.
things are looking up.
Yeah. Well, I hope to have an update soon that it and to hear that it's up, and I'd love to read it and have a hard
Sure,
copy of it. So,
for sure.
good luck. And
Thank you very much.
thank you so much for this exploration of Lewis Carroll and this discussion. It's been a delight, and I'm glad to be able to speak with you again.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
All right.